we have people saying the craziest things on their podcasts.
The things that's causing infertility today is birth control.
There is absolutely zero safe form of birth control.
All birth control is doing is putting you into menopause.
Birth control has so many side effects that aren't even on the label that people aren't aware of.
If she's not bleeding, then she's not detoxing.
This is Paging Dr. Fran.
You can just call me Fran.
She's an OBGYN who realized most people get more medical advice from TikTok than their actual doctor. So she decided to show up here with real evidence-based info, minus the medical jargon.
And just a little bit of sass.
You gotta stop using a tampon. I'm serious.
Guys, he's serious. I can't wait to hear what the guy who has a PhD in nutrition has to say about tampon use.
This is Bev.
This is Jonas.
And this is Outlawed. The misinformation is strong, and we hope that the science can be a little stronger.
Yeah, but you got to be brave to take it on.
Yeah. And Dr. Fran is a brave person.
Yeah, Dr. Fran is an OBGYN in Rochester, New York, and has been a content creator for over 10 years. And we both found her as someone who has a rational and evidence-based voice about various OBGYN topics, but also takes on some of the misinformation that she sees online.
And so we wanted to talk to her about how to combat misinformation and how to make our way in a world that sometimes seems anti-science.
Dr. Fran, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
We're here doing a podcast, and you previously were just out there making TikToks. Now that you have your own podcast, I did my own research, which is excellent as well. But what made you cross the line from doctor to content creator?
So it's not like I set out to become like the girl who stitches chiropractors talking about birth control, right? That was not like my initial goal. Years ago, I had a style blog, and I used to like document what I was wearing to a school every day when I was in medical school. Obviously, when I graduated from medical school and started my OBGYN residency, life got too crazy. I wore scrubs every day. What's there to talk about? So I just kind of stopped all of content creation for those 4 years. When I graduated in 2021, I had 2 young children. Wasn't really like feeling the style blog anymore, but I still was like interested in creating. I've always liked things on the internet and stuff like that. TikTok was really taking off around that time, and the algorithm starts to learn who you are, right? So they knew that they could, were feeding me videos about birth control and pregnancy and labor and delivery. And the first video I ever saw where I felt I had to address it was a young mom who was at a bachelorette party talking about how sad she was that she had to pump and dump her breast milk because she was drinking. And I was like, no, you don't have to do that, right? Like, so I made a video as I was like breastfeeding my own baby, talking about like when you have to pump and dump. And that wasn't like something where I was like, this is now my mission in life to create these videos. But the more I saw, the more I consumed of that content on TikTok, the more I realized that everyone else was seeing this content too, that they were seeing videos that were not, that girl who was pumping and dumping, she wasn't trying to spread misinformation. She was just sharing her experience and her misunderstanding about something. But the more I was seeing about people who were purposely spreading misinformation. And so I felt, now as like an attending who had the knowledge and like enjoyed content creation, that like, who else is going to talk about this, right? Who else is going to like start addressing some of it, other than us? So I just started doing more and more of that kind of work. People would send me videos, it would come across my own feed, and I just kept addressing it. And I think there are many people, although they're the quiet part, but they are the majority who don't always believe the things that they're seeing online and want someone to explain it to them in like clear, not complicated medical speak, but they do want to know, and they do want to know the sources for that information. And I think that's why it's done well.
One of the themes that people talk about is feeling gaslighted by their providers, either in the office or, responding online, and you saying, well, I'm really impressed by you because you seem to approach it with humility, and you don't say, hey, you're wrong. You often say, hey, that's a symptom that you have, but you do provide accurate information. And can you talk about that balance and sort of how you approach it?
The field of medicine has not figured everything out, right? We are a forever evolving field. I cannot tell you every single thing, why things happen. Maybe in 300 years, we'll have figured it all out, but today we don't. And I think sometimes we're bad at explaining that we are limited still in our medical knowledge of like the world. And then we're also bad at explaining that to patients. Like it can come off as dismissive or like we're not looking into it deeper. And that's a place where people can take advantage. I think that hearing the patient first, whether that's you're the patient in front of you who's yours or the patient in a video, is that acknowledging that their experience and their lived experience with the medicine or whatever procedure is like valid, right? Probably all of us have taken some kind of medication at some point where you had kind of like a weird side effect and you're like, well, I know I experienced this. I know it's not a common thing, but like it was real. That's how I lived it. And so first acknowledging just like that, I think goes very far, right? You're going to make your own patients or people online be very unhappy if you're like, well, that's not a side effect that happens. Well, the patient did experience that. So you do have to acknowledge that. I think it's important, especially when it comes to birth control, is that like not everyone's going to like everything, right? Like you may hate how you feel on the birth control pill. Many people say like, I didn't feel like myself. My mood was off. I felt like a crazy person. Not maybe so much like supported in the literature, but that's also a hard thing to study. So I believe you when you say you didn't like how you felt on the birth control pill. And then it's important to educate, like, and this is like where the wellness stuff gets me like really mad, is that like you make birth control like a catch-all. Like there's so many different forms of like contraception. It's not just birth control pills. Not everything is hormonal. By vilifying like birth control because it prevents pregnancy, you're really vilifying a whole bunch of medications that many of them work very differently from each other. And so I think part of that is like the education component, both in my clinic and online, is that I believe you that this one thing didn't work for you, but please don't write off the entire category of contraception because this one thing didn't work for you. And that starts at the beginning with me, with my patients too, where I say like, even if we're starting with the birth control pill, hey, there's like several hundred forms of birth control pills. So if you don't like this specific one, come back, tell me what you didn't like, and we can try something else. There's other forms of progesterone that we can put in here. There's other levels of estrogen that you may or may like better. But a singular bad experience, I hope, doesn't make you write off the entire category of medicines.
The most interesting part of my life on social media was actually on Instagram for a few years, when I think that Instagram had, based on the algorithm, decided that I was a 27-year-old woman.
Okay. So what else were you getting when you were
like advertisements for bras, and not like porny advertisements, but like
yeah. Well,
childcare, like cleanup things. I don't know. It seemed like I was a middle-aged younger mom. I think
that's great. I think it's the quilting.
Yeah, the quilting does throw it off. So a couple of years ago, one of the residents came to me and showed me this video that one of our colleagues had been called out in because a patient had gone to her office and requested a sterilization procedure, a permanent contraception procedure. And the reason that she was interested in that was because she'd had a really bad experience with an IUD in the past. And the doctor responded, okay, I'm happy to do that. Mm-hmm. And I just am curious, why have that procedure instead of the IUD? You said you love your IUD. And the patient said, well, it was horrible getting it in. And the doctor said, okay, well, we can do the permanent contraception procedure, or if you wanted, we could just swap your IUD out in the OR so you don't have to feel it. And the patient reported, first of all, the doctor had validated that she wanted to have a permanent contraception procedure, which some people won't do for patients who have not had children. And this patient had not had children, and was just so patient-centered in terms of, all right, well, let's pick the plan that works for you, but let's make sure that you don't have this painful experience that you had before. We started talking about, all right, well, could we study this? And I was skeptical initially that we could study it. And Jenny, this is the resident's name, went and found that there were actually a bunch of articles studying TikTok on, from gastroenterology and dermatology. And so there was established methodology. And so we decided, all right, well, let's look at hashtag IUD on TikTok.
And so what did you find?
Yeah, testimonials, people showing the pain that they were having. There were quite a few videos that did talk about negative experiences with IUD, that talked about pain, and that talked about distrust of providers because they felt like they were gaslighted, or they felt like they didn't get accurate information about the pain experience with an IUD. That's one of your areas of expertise in your research.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the pain experience is variable for people, and often people, no matter what type of medical experience or medical procedure you're having, if you have a history of anxiety, your pain is worse. There are like a lot of different factors that influence pain. So not everyone experiences an IUD insertion the same way.
Yeah, it didn't mean that your specialty was gaslighting patients. There's also a number of videos by providers, and largely those are educational. Yeah. There are videos that are humorous, but among IUDs, this very important segment of the top videos were about pain and distrust of medical providers. And we felt like that was pretty important information for providers to have, because this is an important conversation that people are having online. And I've changed my practice because of it. I don't know if you have.
In the past, people were hesitant to question doctors and their authority or push back against that. And I think it's good that people are being open about their experiences, because it creates more motivation on our part to do a better job.
For me, I just engage with people about what they know. Have you watched TikTok videos about IUDs? Yeah. And among those who have, I think it gives us something to talk about, right? It gives you a place to start with your counseling, right? I don't start off by saying those are wrong, but I want to know what they drew from those and what information they have from those videos.
I think another thing that we've noticed about misinformation videos is that they try to present just a very simple message, like, vaccines cause autism or whatever, like bad misinformation they have. But the reality, and you've already kind of alluded to this, is that medicine is more nuanced, and sometimes it's harder to package a nuanced message in a short TikTok that people are going to listen to. And I'm curious how you go about doing that when it's complicated science.
Yeah. A lot of the things I do fall back on is the work that like you guys do, and that is scientific studies that have been done, then meta-analyses that have been done, what Cochrane review has been done on this, and presenting that big final picture to patients. Because for the most part, that's what they care about, right? We as physicians, yes, we love reading our journals about this one singular thing that someone looked at in 300 people in the island of whatever. But patients don't care about that. Patients want to know, like, overall, what are my risks and benefits of this thing? And like, if you're telling me that birth control pill causes infertility, I want to know what like the overall arching studies and science show. And so that's why I kind of lean in onto those things. Nuance has a place in the medical discussion, but for the most part, especially on social media, some of that nuance and individualized care isn't there, right? I'm talking about overarching things. And so for the most part, I use overarching science.
I think one of your biggest viral responses is your video about giving people access to tubal ligation. Why was that necessary, and why did you decide to do that?
So in 2021, I was in my office and a patient came in and said, I want to be sterilized. I was like, okay, sounds good. Like risk benefits alternatives, the end. She goes, that's it? I was like, yeah, what do you mean? And she goes, you're the fourth doctor I've talked to about this. I was like, okay, but you're an adult. So like we just talked about it and I feel you understand what you're signing up for. And you came in saying that you want to be sterilized and you don't want children. So I'm a little confused on like what's going on. And I think that's because in my residency program, like my attendings were very like pro-autonomy, and I never felt like that was like a weird taboo. Like in our own residency clinic, we didn't get pushback on sterilizing our younger child-free patients. So I was like a little taken aback. Then they're like, yeah, there's this list on Reddit. And that's how I came in with this binder. And I was like, oh, that's so interesting. She's like, yeah, there's actually a list of doctors on there, but you're not on there. I was like, okay. So I went on to the Reddit. I'm not a Redditor or whatever the word is. But I went on the child-free Reddit and I found it really difficult to get myself added to this list that they were on. And you had to like email and start a Reddit account and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, this is really annoying. Right around that same time, they had leaked like the Dobbs decision, right? That they were going to overturn Roe versus Wade. And I'm in a Facebook group for OBGYN moms. There's like 10,000 women in this group. We were talking about it and someone's like, well, if you are willing to sterilize young child-free people, like please put your name in this list. And so this comment thread was like 800 doctors long. Then I was like, I want to make a video telling people how to get sterilized. So I just like found a video where someone's talking about getting sterilized. I stitched it and I said, if you want to get your tube side, 1, make a problem visit or a consult with your doctor. Don't wait for your annual, like make a specific appointment. 2, tell your doctor you want to be sterilized. Tell them that you understand this is permanent, non-reversible, that you do not want more or any children. 3, like hear risk benefits alternatives and get surgery scheduled. 4, if you can't find a doctor who's willing to do this, tell me where you are and I will find you a doctor. So then for the next like month, everyone was commenting on this one video. I'm in Boise, Idaho. And then I would go to that Facebook list, type in Boise, and go back to the video and be like, go see Dr. Beverly Gray in Idaho, right? And I was like, this is like, okay, this is helping 100 people, but how do I make this like more helpful? How do I get this information more accessible? So I was like, well, like a Google Doc seems very easy to like do. So then I went back to the Facebook group and I said, hey, I want to make a public list of OBGYNs who are willing to do this. If you are willing to put yourself on a public list, please submit yourself to this like Google form. Out of that, 150 women signed up. I made this fake video where I was scrubbing in, I was trying to like, be creative and TikTok, being like, if you need your tubes tied, like we're here to help you, right? I wish I could tell you that I had the foresight to do this on the day that that decision was made live. It was like pure kind of coincidence that that happened. I did not intend that. I wish I could say I did. But I posted it that day. It did go very viral. And then for the next month, that list grew from 150 to 1,500. I gained like 100,000 followers on TikTok. And I spent truly hours and hours and hours and hours of my life putting this list together, where every time a doctor emailed me, said, I want to be on the list, I put them on there, looked up their clinic website, linked to it. Every time I saw a patient did that, I did the same. I have probably spent hundreds and hundreds of hours like curating this list. I have since now started paying my sister to do it. I just don't have the time anymore, but that's kind of where that came from. I just wanted to help people who wanted something that apparently some doctors were withholding for their own reasons. And I know from the physician's point of view, they were trying to protect their patients, right? Like we know that people at times regret it. We're almost trying to protect patients from themselves, but that's like very patronizing and not believing women when they're saying they know what's right for them. So I just wanted to help people. And that's like the long story about how we got there.
And I think the timing around when you made that list available was also important because we, and I'm sure you as well, were seeing more patients wanting sterilization because of concerns about unintended pregnancy and not having access to abortion. And I think that the timing was also really important for people who needed that service.
Absolutely. And my patients still say that. And like, listen, I live in New York State. Abortion is protected in our Constitution, but they still don't trust it. And they say that to me. And so I can only imagine where in other states where there's much a more restrictive environment, how more fearful patients in those states are.
Interesting insight in those 4 steps that you listed is book a consult, right? Like your first one, which I think is just sort of savvy use of medical care, but isn't something that necessarily people understand or apply in their daily.
I think it's hard for patients, and I know because I've made videos about this, that there's a difference between your physical annual wellness exam and if you have a problem that you want addressed, and they don't always cover each other, right? So in gynecology, a preventative care visit is for preventative care like pap smears, mammograms, vaccines, those kind of things. But if you want a surgical consult, that's a different type of appointment. Patients don't like that because it costs more money. And that is the really big downside about our healthcare system, is that patients have to think about money when it comes to their healthcare. Whereas in a place where you don't have to do that, you don't have to worry about a copay or a second consult fee or those kind of things. But it is how you get better medical care, right? I'm going to be able to really sit with you for my 30 minutes of consult slot with you where we can really discuss it. So I really know that you understand, rather than the rushing through because you added it on during your annual wellness exam and I'm trying to provide you care, but it's not as good.
We were talking to a guest, I don't know, a few months ago about misinformation. And one thing that they were saying is that sometimes misinformation can be surrounded by like one thread of truth that just kind of goes off the deep end. And so that's, I think, why people see videos and then they see like, okay, well, I could understand why this might be truthful, so I'm going to believe it. But one of the things you talk about is that there are ways to detect when a video is misinformation. And I'm curious if you could help us be better BS detectors.
Yeah. So I think the first thing is who is telling you this information, right? We all know the most common types of jobs out there, right? Physicians, nurse practitioners, PAs, nurses. Those are people where we know what their training is in that field for the most part. If someone is telling you medical information online and you don't know what kind of practitioner they are, that should be suspect to you, right? If it just says doctor, but nowhere does it say board certified OBGYN, gastroenterologist, whatever type of job they are. If they don't list their type of degree, right? Are you an MDDO? Or is it just, you don't know, you're just a doctor, but it says doctor, but like, what's your degree and no one knows? That's suspicious to me, right? If it just says like wellness coach, like that doesn't mean anything. That is something that you just made up for yourself. So first, who's telling you this, and like look into their credentials. If you can't like easily find them online, like if you don't know their name, or like for me, it's not fair either, because like I don't put my last name on my social media. But if you Google Dr. Fran, you're going to find my LinkedIn, you're going to find where I work, you can find my MPI number, like you can easily find who I am and like what my degree is in. If you can't do that, like be suspicious. The second is do they back up that information that they're telling you with any sort of information, like where they're getting that from? Are they giving you a PubMed ID? Are they showing you where the study is? Are they showing you a guideline from a society, like a standard medical society? If they're just telling you something that seems like, whoa, that's like really jarring, but can't back it up, that should be suspicious to you too. And then this takes a little bit more work, but like thinking about like what their motive is with what they're telling you. If they're making a whole video under the guise of like Dr. Wellness, EndoCure, and then they're making a video, this is what medicine doctors aren't telling you, and that is that castor oil packets are going to solve all your problems. And then in their bio, you can buy castor oil packets. That's suspicious, right? So I think those kind of three, and that takes a lot of work, right? That's a lot of like mental work when you're just trying to doom scroll on TikTok at night after your kids are in bed. Like you don't have to like do all this work, but that's why they're so effective, right? They seem like they have authority. They can say whatever they want without having to prove it. And in the end, maybe they'll sell you some castor oil packets and make $20.
Why chiropractors? It is a lot of at least you do have a bunch of videos refuting these wild birth control claims by chiropractors.
Yeah. Just as my disclaimer, I am not anti-chiropractor. I'm anti-chiropractors who feel they need to be talking about birth control and hormones. Chiropractic care, for the most part, has always been kind of a cash pay system. So looking for new ways to get cash pay things makes sense for many people's business model. So no longer are you just collecting $20 to crack someone's back, but now I can charge you $400 for a hormone test that's never going to be covered by insurance. They don't have to say like, well, it's not covered by insurance because it's not evidence-based. They just say like, well, everything I do is cash pay, right? So it's a business model for some people. And then online, I think, I'm actually going to call it out. Like the Wellness Way is a chain of chiropractic clinics where they really encourage them to have a big social media following. And how do you get a big social media following for the most part? You say things that keep people interested. And how you keep people interested, you give them kind of like a, wow, that's crazy story. And that's kind of how it spins into this.
So I'm curious, do you read the comments? I mean, you engage with them sometimes, but there's negative stuff too. And do you want to engage with that?
Yeah. I mean, I think it just depends on where it's coming from, right? If someone is being like mean to me as a person, that is like a block, delete, move on with my life. Like, I'm not going to gain anything with engaging. I'm not gaining anything by opening my heart open to that. Like, if you're coming at it a little snarky, but it feels like you are open to conversation, I think of that as an opportunity. Like, okay, it seems you do want to talk about this thing, whether it's birth control or maternity leave or laboring down or whatever. Like, it's kind of an opportunity where someone still, again, has a misunderstanding about something, and I now have the chance to talk about it. Am I always going to win someone over with that conversation or make them see my side or whatever? No, but other people may see it. They may think about it differently. The point of social media is to be social. So if I'm just talking to myself and not talking with anyone else, then like, what's the point? I will say sometimes people get mad that I don't engage with like every comment. And to that I say I have 1.5 million followers. I and a full-time job and 3 children. As much as I'm already attached to my phone, I can't like live and breathe and die in my phone in the comments. So I love the comments. There's so many people who have followed me from my early days of pre-med school. That's my favorite part, is like feeling like I've kind of like have had friends over the last decade online.
I'm impressed by your like ability to say, sort of, for my health, I'm just going to block that person. Because I mean, that's hard too, right? Because like you feel the criticism, even if it doesn't.
You do. And like it weighs on me at times where I'm like, wow, they really misunderstood what I was trying to say, or like I didn't articulate myself in the way that I wanted to, or you're misconstruing what I said. And that part is hard too, but it's a continuing way to evolve and learn how to communicate. And I've learned a lot from people calling me out on stuff and making me realize like, oh, okay, maybe that wasn't for the best, or you're right, the field of medicine could say this differently, or I could see how someone saying this could be perceived this way, and now I'm going to say it differently. So it's still an opportunity for me. Like I'm not a perfect doctor or perfect creator. And I think, in medicine, it's just like another way to like be better, even if it's hard.
I think when you're being authentic and you really show that you care about people and you care about the subject in science, like most of the feedback is going to be positive. Most of our comments about the podcast have been very positive. One of our favorite reviews is a 1-star murderers. We made some mugs.
I hope you did. And I love that. And like, I love being a little snarky. Like, okay, I love that. I'm putting in a mug. Like, I'm going to send it to my mom. She's going to be so proud of the work I'm doing, right? Like, I have a little t-shirt line that I do on the side that like a couple of those things came out of like snarky comments that I thought were hilarious. And so sometimes you're like, those are people that you can't win over and like convince that like the work that you're doing is important. So like you might as well have a little fun with it.
So so I love the contraception cardigan.
Yeah.
One of my colleagues has it, and then I've seen it a bunch in the real world. And so
Jonas wants one.
Yeah, no, I do.
Oh.
And
oh my God, I'll send you one. What's your favorite color?
Pink.
Pink. Okay, you're getting one.
Amazing.
I'm just like so glad that people like love it and are like sharing their love for birth control through a cardigan.
Yeah. You engage with the idea a lot that people are getting education from social media on a number of health topics, right? And that's backed up by the data for sure. It has advantages and disadvantages. Why do you feel like it's imperative for healthcare providers, for OBGYNs in particular, to be part of that narrative?
Part of our jobs as physicians and other healthcare professionals has always been education, right? A part of sitting in a clinic room with your patient is educating. So we are used to taking all the medical things that we have been taught and all the journals that we read and all the current studies and like translating that into like an easy to digest thing for our patients. So us educating in the clinic translates to educating online. We already do all that work. It's just about putting a camera in front of you instead of a patient in front of you. It's learning a couple little techie things about how you put captions in a video. But if we're not there to fill the internet with the information that patients clearly are desiring, it's going to get filled by misinformation. There's like so much space and there's so much interest, and I really make it a goal for myself that I really follow a lot of doctor, nurse, PA creators and amplify their voices because it's important. We might as well be there being like, here's the simple to digest reason why we recommend this, and here's what the evidence shows, and see if this applies to you and talk to your own care team. But here's the information that your doctor very likely doesn't have time to spend 25 minutes talking to you about.
It allows you to acknowledge that they have some expertise too, that they're bringing something to the room, that they already know something, and then you can engage with that. Even if you're countering something that you think was misinformation or incorrectly presented, then at least you know where they're starting from, which is, a place of more knowledge than not, right? Mm-hmm. If they just came and didn't know anything about it.
Seeing what your patients are hearing makes you a better doctor because you're able to, in a very kind and understanding way, be able to explain what they're seeing and how it applies to them. There were several lawsuits about like Depo, right? You guys have seen like the meningioma stuff, and that was a big topic on social media. And so I gave a talk to my department last year talking about how like I had recently made a video talking about like what the study showed and like what is a meningioma. It's not brain cancer, right? And one of the other doctors was like, I wish we had had this talk last week when a patient came in and was concerned about brain tumors, and I had no idea what she was talking about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Otherwise, people think, like, who is this person? Like, they don't know anything. They don't know what people
they don't know anything. They don't keep up on the information, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's the stuff that people believe about doctors, and partially because the wellness practitioners are out there being like, your doctors don't learn anything. They don't know. There's no research on this. But like, we know that's not the reality. But also, if a study was published 3 days ago, I may not have read it yet, right? Like,
give me a minute. Yeah.
Give me a second.
Yeah.
So one of our goals in the podcast is to help people have better conversations about abortion, and in particular to engage with people who maybe feel differently. And I think you touched on some of the techniques that you use to think about and talk to people who might have differing opinions to you. But I wonder if you have advice for us about how we reach that audience, or advice for listeners about how they should have those conversations.
Especially when it's someone who maybe isn't calling you a murderer, but is a little bit more like confused about how, say, the process of an abortion works. Like, what is a 6-week abortion? Like, what's a medical abortion look like? And like, what's it doing? What's a surgical abortion look like? Sometimes just providing straight facts is helpful, because there might be just that misunderstanding or misconstruing of what it actually is. I personally have a lot of success by taking other people's videos and like cutting it up and dissecting it. Well, birth control causes infertility. And then I'm like, here's the Cochrane review of 7 million women, blah, 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 right? Sometimes that's like engaging. People want to see that and they want that information. So I find that helpful. Do I get snarky with the chiropractors when they tell the females to go test their hormones for birth control? Yeah, I'm going to get a little snarky about that. But I'm not going to get snarky with someone who just misunderstands like the process of something. And that's where it's like important to understand, like, is this a time for humor, or is this a time for like education, giving you the facts, and like knowing that you are going to at least have heard me and then take it into consideration.
You can find Dr. Fran on TikTok at Paging Dr. Fran and Instagram at Paging Dr. Fran. There's a pattern.
Yeah.
And if you want to buy a really cool birth control cardigan, we will have a link in the show notes.
Proceeds from the sweater purchases go to support the Guttmacher Institute. And if you didn't hear our Guttmacher Institute interview with Isaac Maddow-Zimmett last week, you should check it out.
Opinions expressed in this podcast are our own. Philanthropy keeps this podcast ad-free, and to make a tax-deductible donation, please find a link in the show notes.
This podcast is executive produced by us, Dr. Bev Gray and Dr. Jonas Swartz and Stevie Manning. Thanks to Nick Thorburn, Patrick Ford, and Maker for our score. And extra special thanks to Dr. Fran for dispelling some misinformation with us today.
If you want to talk to us,
or give us an idea for the show,
you can email us at outlawedpodcast@gmail.com, or suggest a guest, or, tell us a story.
Tell us a story.
Thanks for listening.